Hello. Hi everyone, I'm Sam, and I'm not a professional photographer, which is to say, I'm an amateur. And as an amateur, sometimes I take pictures that aren't quite right, and I don't get exactly what I want in them. A lot of times there are people in the background, or maybe there's an ugly trash can back there, and I just want to get rid of it. So how do I get rid of the objects I don't want? I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. But before we start that tutorial, I have a bonus tutorial for you. If you open up YouTube, go to Not a Photographer, one of the videos, here's what you want to do. This is going to make you such a great photographer. Hit like, then go ahead and hit subscribe. And if you're feeling extra wild, go ahead and hit this bell thing. Get notified every time I post a video. Now for the actual tutorial. So we're gonna open up Photoshop, and you can see my image here. It's decent. I got a cool little arch, but here's the problem. If you zoom in, there's people everywhere. And I'll tell you what, I don't know these people. I don't want them in my picture. I don't want pictures of them taking pictures of things. I don't want pictures of them sitting down in a corner. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna get rid of them. And I'm going to use the clone stamp tool to do it. And every time you do this, anytime you do like anything that messes with the integrity of the image, you want to click new layer. So this way, right, I can draw all over it, whatever. I can erase like parts of the image. It doesn't really matter because it's just on this layer. And if I don't like it, I can delete it. The layer is still there. So we're going to click new layer. Then you want to go over to the side and click on clone stamp tool, or you can hit S for stamp. And before you do anything, you want to make sure that sample is not on current layer. That's going to be the default. Make sure it's all layers. If it's just current layer, all it's going to sample is this blank layer. So nothing will happen if you try to paint with the clone stamp tool. It just doesn't do anything. So you want to sample all layers. This way it'll sample this background layer, but if you don't like it, you can delete and it's gone. The clone stamp tool, it might seem scary, but it's actually quite easy to use. All you have to do is when you have it, hold Alt, and then I'll let you select what you want to sample. When I sample, I then drag it over. You can see a little preview of it. It's easy to see here. If I sampled this area with Alt, then I come over here and just do a normal click and paint, it'll paint what's being sampled over here, but over here. It takes directly from the image and puts it over here. So for these purposes, we want to get rid of these people. And we just want to choose terrain that looks similar to what we have here. And you know what, I think down here actually looks pretty close to what we have here. So I'm going to sample, Alt, click. That's how we sample. And go over here and just start painting in a little bit. And that works really well. But watch, here's a problem. If we go too low, we get to the shadowy part. And we don't want that, because now that shadow looks like it came from nowhere. So here's an amateur tip. You don't have to choose an area that's perfect for this, right? I can just choose this little area, and all I'm going to use is about this much. And once I run out of that, I'm just going to click again, Alt, click. That resamples, you can kind of restart and get going again. And that works really well, I think. And so now I'm getting up towards an area that has like a defined pattern that I don't want to mess with. See, if I do that, it messes with this line that goes through and you can tell I've done something. So I'm just gonna make the brush smaller, have a little more control. If you've seen my video on how to use the brush tool, you'll know that generally you wanna have the flow low and the hardness all the way down. For the clone stamp tool, you do wanna have the hardness all the way down, but flow generally you want it to be at 100. This should be the default settings for your clone stamp tool. If it's not, just make sure hardness is at 0, flow is at 100. And if you want to know more about the brush tool, go ahead and watch this video right here. So we've made our brush smaller, and we just want to get rid of this little bit of head right there. And sampling down here works, but it looks a little too much like the ground. So maybe I'll sample from somewhere right here, which is also right below this line. There, and that fits really nicely. Here's before we use the clone stamp tool, and there's after. But now you might notice, well, now these shadows are coming from nowhere, right? So we will have to fix that. But I'm going to make the brush bigger since we're affecting a larger area. So I'm just going to click and start painting. And remember to just keep clicking, kind of resets the brush, and keep going, right? And then when we get closer to this edge, I'm going to make the brush smaller. And now I can sample probably from closer. And we'll just kind of do that. Anytime you mess up, just hit Control Z. That undoes your last undos. You undo what you previously did. There, and that looks pretty good. And now I'll just do the same thing for the rest and probably speed that up a bit. Okay, so now all that's left is this person's head. And the reason I didn't do this is because if I just take it away, I mess with the pattern that was here. I want to make it look as realistic as possible. So what I need to do is look on my image and see where there's a place that I have a line going in the same direction as this line would be if the head were not there. And luckily I have that basically right here. It does the same thing. So I'm going to select and make sure that the angle is just about what I want. And I think right here gives me just about what I want. And then I'm going to just paint that in. There we go. I've painted it in, and now I can paint around it with just, other things from the area, and it will look perfect. Great. Now let's look at the before and after of what we've done in this area. That's pretty incredible. That looks very good. And now we have all of these people over here. So for these people, you can see that they're behind areas of the picture that we don't want to affect. So I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm just going to make a quick little selection. If you don't know what it is I'm doing, that's okay, because neither do I. The pen tool is awful. But if you'd like a video explaining what it is that I'm attempting to do, please let me know in the comments and I'll give it a shot. Basically what I'm doing is I'm making a shape that lets me select just this area, because I don't want to affect the layers in front of where these people are. Those are, defined layers that if I mess with them, they're going to look very strange. So once I've made my shape, I'll hit selection and hit OK. Now the only thing that is going to be affected is what's in this selection. So I take my clone stamp tool and I hit Alt over here and I try to paint out here. Nothing will happen. But if I paint in here, it'll work. So we'll go through and do the same thing. And now I'll just grab and paint. And it's the same process. So I'll probably speed this up. Great. So you don't have to use a selection. You can just be really careful with what you're doing, but I like to use a selection just so I don't have to be careful. And once we're done, we want to go over and paint these people, right? But we can't with the selection still here. To get rid of a selection, all you do is hit Control D. And now we come over here. And this one's going to be a little trickier because we have these lines from the rocks. We also have these shadows, and most of these shadows are not from people, though there are some that are. So we can't just get rid of all of the shadows. We have to be very careful with how we work. Luckily, we have some shadow in here that we can use to paint over there. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this guy sitting on this rock. When you're doing this, you want to look out for pattern repetition. That's a dead giveaway that what you're doing is using the clone stamp tool. For instance, if I sample from right here where these holes are, and then I paint right here, I paint in the exact same holes right next to each other. Now I can do that if I really want to, but I need to choose from further away. So say I choose from around here, and I paint that in. Now there's this hole over here and this one over here. They're probably far enough apart where no one's going to notice. But generally, you want to choose somewhere that's a little smoother. Since this is the shadow of somebody who was sitting there, we do want to get rid of it. So we'll go ahead and just do that. Being careful not to get rid of this shadow, which was made by the rocks themselves. And that looks pretty good, I think. Now you'll see this pattern is repeated over here. It looks a little fake, so I'm just going to change that a bit and maybe get rid of this second crack. And there we go, that looks good. I'm going to do the same thing over here to these people. And let's go way back. That looks pretty nice. We just have our arch. All of the people are gone. So let's now look at the before and after. There's before. All of these people were in the frame, right? And now, after we use our clone stamp tool, they're all gone. That's pretty incredible. So that's how you use the clone stamp tool to get rid of things you don't want in your image. This can work on a large scale. It can work on a small scale. Use selections if you want to have really crisp, defined edges. Make sure you keep hitting Alt and resampling so it looks nice and smooth. That's all I got. Remember the first tutorial of today, and like and subscribe. And otherwise, hope you check out the rest of my channel. Have a good one.